Okay, guys, this is the last part of industrialization, immigration, and urbanization. And we're talking about city life. Remember, millions and millions of immigrants are coming into the country, and they are mostly settling in the cities because that's where the jobs and factories were. So obviously, there's going to be lots and lots of problems. Where are you going to put all these people? They need housing, office space. So they throw up these buildings very, very quickly, cheap material. And restrooms, the bathrooms are either in the basement or sometimes outside in the back. Uh, Very small apartments just to jam in as many people as possible. Fresh water is a definite problem. A lot of people got their water from the river, and of course there were that's where the human waste would go, the dead animals factory waste, and this is going to result in cholera and typhoid. And then sanitation, of course, is going to be a very horrible problem with garbage collection and a sanitation department going to have to be created. This is an example of what the, oh, sorry about that, guys. That's my dog Jax. Okay, you can see how crowded these buildings were right next to one another. People in the middle of the night didn't want to go outside or down in the basements and would throw old their waste out the windows. It was miserable. Again, we've seen how there was no air conditioning during the summertime, and people were on the streets. They were vending on the streets, and this is just an example of an Italian area of the cholera from the bad water. Took people out. They didn't realize what was causing it, and many people died of disease from this bad water. Once again, you can get a feel for how crowded it was. People would throw up shelters outside the city sometimes to get away from that. But again, your sanitation problems are going to be enormous. So, what were some of the things that they did to solve that? For fresh water, they were going to bring water in from the lakes up north, and they used a system of gravity, much like they did in Roman times. You can see how huge these aqueducts are. These are people here, and the water is going to be brought back gravity-wise all the way from upstate New York to solve that. Okay, transportation. Elevated trains, subways, streetcars pulled by horses, and then ultimately electric streetcars. For recreation, keep the kids from playing in the streets, are going to build parks and museums. We talked about that a little bit with the Gospel of Wealth. And of course, Central Park in New York City is this enormous, beautiful place right in the middle of the city. Rats and roaches are going to be a problem again with that sanitation. So this is an example of elevated train. You can see they still have the horses down here. Okay, and so you're getting a combination of streetcars and horses and the elevated trains, and that system is going to go into effect in the city. This is a horse-drawn streetcar. And you can see that they're going to lay tracks down. We have some pictures of Shreveport with the horse streetcars. This is in Miami, another example of these horse-drawn trolleys that can carry people at a time. This is one of the original subway systems, and in New York City, it's an amazing thing, and if any of you have ever ridden one of those, it still carries thousands and thousands and thousands of people every day. Beautiful Central Park. Please watch that video that I have posted, and it talks about the rise of New York City and New York building at Central Park. And Central Park is right in the central area of New York City. So you can see this is an older picture of New York City. It's got the Twin Towers there. but it is an amazing, amazing city. This is the first skyscraper. It was built in Chicago, 10 stories high, and sadly it was demolished in 1931, and now there's a building there that's about 80 stories high. But this is the first one, and it up in Chicago. Okay, this is the beautiful Chrysler building. It's called Art Deco, and with those beautiful arches, and it was very temporarily the tallest building in the world because at the time it was finished, they were building another one called the Empire State Building. But the Chrysler building is still in New York. They're going to use as much, real estate is going to be so very valuable that they use every available space. And these are called flat iron buildings. They almost look like they could blow over. They're so narrow, but they build them high. Sorry. I apologize. I'm trying to do this from home and I get a few interruptions. Okay, getting back to the architecture, you can see this is very unique. All right, this is the Empire State Building. It says recently. I keep meaning to change that. It's been about 10 years, I guess that's recently. Donald Trump at one time owned this building with a partner, a Japanese partner, and he sold his interest in it for $57.5 million. As you know, our president is a realtor, real estate dealer. Okay, these are some pictures taken by Louis Hine of workers on the Empire State Building. Notice that he has absolutely no safety equipment here. He's just on a girder. In the background, you can see the Chrysler building that you were talking about. And it always amazes me because we think Louis Hine is the guy taking these pictures. He's way up high with those workers. This guy, oh my goodness, he's just going from space to space. I can't even imagine. They used to hire Indians from some of the mountainous areas who were not afraid of heights. And some of these Native Americans, I believe the Navajo, would work on these buildings, and they were in great demand. This one always makes me dizzy. Look how high up he is. He's just standing there in these rickety boards, so high up. And I will tell you, there were many accidents, and people did die in the construction of the Empire Building. Okay, some more problems. Pollution, obviously. The factories are spewing waste into the air and into our waters. People need protection. All these thousands and thousands of people need police protection. Fire departments are going to be formed. The poor need to be taken care of, and organizations are going to be put in place to help the poor. We're going to talk about Jane Addams with the Hull House, and reformers like Jacob Riis and Louis Hine are going to take pictures to show the plight of the poor and get people to realize that some things needed to be done. And then city codes are going to be passed, and you guys watched that presentation on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory and saw how that tragedy brought about fire inspection and laws about doors having to open. If you're inside, you can always get out. You can't get trapped. Okay, so we talked about that Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. It was the deadliest industrial fire. 146 people died, mostly young immigrant women, and it was devastating. They would rather jump than burn to death, and so many of them jumped from those high floors, and it was so high up, and they didn't have adequate equipment. The ladders didn't reach. The fire escapes broke. It was absolutely devastating. Horrible pictures of the girls that had jumped and the helplessness of the onlookers. So as we talked about, the results from the fire codes, the fire escapes have to be inspected and in good shape. Doors have to be able to open out, and you don't block them, and they cannot be locked. And If you look around in every classroom, you'll see fire extinguishers, and they're inspected regularly. So those are all things that resulted from the fire. Also, there was an uptake in union, um, the textile union, and a little bit more power to the workers. Again, the devastation, you can see the fire escape, how it just crumbled, and people trying to identify the bodies here. Okay, this is Jane Addams, and we're going to talk more about Jane Addams when we talk about reformers, but Jane A. Addams is going to establish what is called a settlement house, and this is Hull House in Chicago, and she is going to take in families, provide child care, provide training for people. It's also a haven for other reformers, people like Florence Kelley, who will be befriended by Jane Addams, who will be an advocate for children and get labor laws passed so children are not in the factories when they're 5 and 6 years old and getting hurt. So settlement houses, very important to know. It's very much like Providence House, like we have here in Shreveport. And Jane Addams is the founder of settlement houses, Assistance for the Poor. This is Jacob Riis, and Jacob Riis, much like Louis Hine, is going to take photographs. And one of the things, he is an innovator, is he goes at night into the tenements, and he is going to use a brand new thing called flash photography. And basically, he's showing the plight of the poor in these tenements. And he writes this book, or he produces this book with his photography, How the Other Half Lives. Then he goes from place to place, and it basically shows a slideshow of these pictures in order to raise money. Also, it's going to raise attention of what's going on, and laws are going to be passed about sanitation, bathrooms, running water, capacity. You can't have too many people in one apartment. So you can see here, I mean, this is all just kind of jammed into these tenements, and uh, you can imagine. But there were rich folks there too. I mean, this is an example of a couple of penthouses. They've even got swimming pools. These things go for millions of dollars in New York City. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is the Brooklyn Bridge, and please watch that video on the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. It's considered an engineering wonder. You can see it's 100,000, 150,000 cars a day go across it. It's still going there up to today, and it was an amazing piece of construction. Look how big this is. You can see the guys up here at the top. The way they did it was they took these huge, huge, huge boxes, like a block long, encased, and they dropped them into the river. And if you can think of like a glass that you turn upside down into water and bring it down, it keeps the air in there. And they drop these huge boxes down, and then workers are going into these boxes and digging so they can get down to bedrock. Some of these are 60, 70 feet down in the water, and you can imagine the pressure. Sometimes they're breathing in these in enclosed areas, and some of the workers got things called the bends. It was called Caisson's disease, and it was severe cramps. Some of these guys even died because of this. So please watch this short video on the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. It was designed by John Roebling, and sadly he dies before he gets a chance to actually build it. He has an accident while inspecting, and actually his toes get crushed, and then he dies from tetanus. His son is going to take over, and he gets injured on the job as well. So this was kind of dangerous undertaking with the caissons and with these workers up here on the girders. But it is still standing today, and hundreds of thousands of cars go across the Brooklyn Bridge every day. Okay, guys, so please watch those two videos, and then you're going to have a quiz.